We're sitting down with presidential candidate Omid Salari. Omid, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Taking time out of campaigning in the atrium.
Like I said, my pleasure.
All right, well, you are the only candidate with employee experience with the USC. How will this affect the way you run the USC as a government and not as a corporation?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that presidents need to always have two hats on. They need to remember that we have a corporation that's funded almost entirely on student money, which is, a shame when we run a deficit because it's purely student money that we're getting in. And because, I've worked at the Spoke, I've worked at reservations, and I volunteered at CHRW. This summer I actually had a job on each floor of this building, so I lived here 10 hours a day. And I live on campus, so really I just don't go home ever. I do have the experience in the operations. There are a lot of little things that I want to do, maybe get faster elevators for reservation staff, get better carts so they can move tables around. I mean, you look at the tables outside, they just kind of appear in the morning, but really it's like these poor students coming here at 7 in the morning moving things, and there are a bunch of little changes we can make their lives better that didn't even warrant making my platform because they're not substantive or expensive. In terms of running it as a government, I was the first ever student intern for the USC this summer, updating the policies. I've been speaker for 2 years, once as more or less a council babysitter, and this year as a much more involved kind of partisan individual, to the point where I had to actually, every meeting I need to sit out of some of the motions and get my deputy chair to speak because I drafted some of them. So I have a lot of experience running it as a government and as a corporation, and I understand that there needs to be a separation. In their policies, we're defined as a corporation, and we just play at being a government. But it's more important, I think, to maintain that governmental stance because, after all, we're representing students, and we're using student money to fuel the corporation.
Well, you touched on about platform and policy, and I have to say my favorite platform point is about the policy upheaval and bringing it back a real perspective to the USC. I may be one of those 2 people that really loved it. But when it comes down to it, what are the top 3 policies that really need overhauling with the USC?
Okay, the last time the policies were looked at, other than by me and Will Bordelin, who's done a lot of good work, was 2004 by the general counsel there. And it was kind of a new position, and the general counsel at the time kind of ingratiated herself into everything to the point where even the bylaws, bylaw number 1 is the main rule book for the USC. It was signed off by the president and by the general counsel. We don't have a general counsel anymore because the only other corporation in London that has one is 3M, and we are not that big of a corporation, believe it or not. And so when it comes down to 3 important policies, I think that the building usage policy is a huge one because it defines not only what students can book out at reservations, but who's in charge. And right now there's a section 29, it's loitering, which the way it's explained is that if someone is caught sleeping in the UCC, they are required to be asked to leave by the building services manager because he's the only one in charge of enforcing the policy. So essentially, Paul Tomlinson has to come down, not wake anybody up, not ask them to leave. He just has to ask them to leave while they're still asleep. This doesn't make any sense. I hear David talk a lot about people over policy. I think that good policy should always take into account what students need. So building usage is a huge one for me. There are a couple purchasing policies that exist. One that says if a commissioner coordinator wants to buy T-shirts and hats, the USC should pay for half of it as long as it's justifiable. That's ridiculous. We don't budget for it. No one knows about this rule. And the third one is the travel policy. This is particularly important for vice presidents, I think. We've had vice presidents in the past who have rented unnecessarily expensive cars to drive to their USA conferences. Or, no, not this year. This year has been very, very good because Eli runs a really tight ship. But if we have a rule book in place, it makes it a lot easier to punish the VPs who abuse their powers and privileges.
Great. What's your 2-ply toilet paper?
Oh, do you mean the gimmick in my campaign?
What's your gimmick, yeah.
I want to do so many little things behind the scenes. For example, things like the haunted house, while it seems like a great idea and it's very charitable, it's always for a good cause. While, yeah, we made money and donated it, we actually lost a lot of money. I myself personally, working at reservations, made like $500 moving the haunted house from the old gyms into the squash courts downstairs and then back up into a storage facility. That's why we had like a haunted forest kind of thing. In many ways, I think all of my platform that you read is a little bit gimmicky, because the really important stuff that's really going to save students money is invisible to even counselors. You need to be an employee sitting in CHRW, seeing them rifle through like 30,000 CDs. There's over 215 years of music, in like more than anyone could ever listen to. And all they need is like a nice inventory system, which would cost next to nothing.